Okay, everybody ready? Fantastic. Thank you. Well, hello, everybody. Thank you very much for joining us today. My name is Philip Butterworth Hayes. I am the editor of Unmanned Airspace, which is a dedicated website to news on UAS traffic management and everything to do with airspace management for drones and eVTOLs. Delighted to have you all today. Thank you very much for spending some time with us. We have an absolutely terrific panel here. We're going to be talking about the way forward for U-Space, which is a highly complex but nevertheless incredibly important program. And we have really in the room, I don't think I can remember a better panel of experts to talk about this. Stefan Voberg he's the U-Space project manager at the EASA. One of the most difficult things today is to be a regulator in this domain, where there's very little data to go on, lots of pressure from governments and from the commercial industry. So really important job and very difficult. Billy is joining us from Sweden, from the air navigation service provider there, one of my favorite European ANSPs, and doing some really wonderful things in the UTM space. Andrew Haitley probably knows more about this than anybody else. Doing a lot of research at Eurocontrol down in Bretigny in France. Has led a lot of the CESAR programs into quite complex technical and operational issues behind UTM. Koen de Vos, the Secretary General of GUTMA, the UTM Global Trade Association. Again, many years experience in both the politics and the commercial and technical area of UTM. Mikhail Shamin, who is fantastic to have here. Helicus is providing healthcare services via drones, which is a fantastic early use case and shows what can be done with the drone economy. And it's great to have you here. And then Amit Ganju, who everybody should know. ANRA is a real pioneer in UTM around the world and has a fantastic experience now from many continents on the way forward. So this really is an amazing panel. And I won't speak for too long, but I just want to sort of come up with a vision. So in 2017, when we started Unmanned Airspace, I had a vision that by 2023, there would be cities in Europe where there would be multiple drones flying, all sorts of different missions, healthcare, perhaps delivery, some police drones flying, sharing the airspace, one operator, perhaps 20 drones occasionally, all supported by a UTM system where you have a single technology, but several competing service providers competing on service, price, whatever. And this is the gateway to the commercial drone industry. The commercial drone industry can only make money, can only scale up if we have beyond visual line of sight, automated flights, increasing numbers with increasing acceptability. And for that, we rely on UTM. So that was my vision. We're not there yet. What I'd like to do is explore how we get there from where we are now. And there are 6 strands to this. There's the technology, the regulations, the operational side, the standards, the business case, and there's the security side as well to make sure that everybody is where they say they are. And all those pipelines have to be matured in some way. And I'd like to start by asking Mikhail, because you're across all of this, you're one of the pioneers trying to put this whole thing together, trying to develop service within an ecosystem. Where are we? Where are we from that vision? And what do we need to do to get there?
Thanks, Phil. Thanks for the nice introduction. We are closing in, but we, on these various aspects that you mentioned, have some way to go. From the field, from the use cases side, need some harmonization, more harmonization across member states of Europe, for example, to be faster and more clear in what really is acceptable by the civil aviation authorities to fly. Secondly, we need more, what you mentioned also, automation and integration, so that we can deliver, let's say, a real service that is viable, not have individual very manual flights, but we really need to get everyone to focus much more, I believe, on integration, modular setups of compatible tools from the different players, and to automate. We are seeing a lot of parties pushing for fly, 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 but I believe we need to do volume in the air and robust automated flights. I would maybe keep to that, but that's the gist: harmonization, automation, and modularity, collaboration.
Yeah, that's great. It's a fantastic high-level start, but I'd like just to push you just a little bit on that in terms of integration, automation. How far are we off that? How far are we actually off being able to provide that service that we talked about? I mean, are we 2 years? Are we 12 months? I mean, what's the timeline, and who has to move first?
Well, probably everyone has to move together, because everyone has the tendency of watching to the other ones and waiting a bit. And like manufacturers are typically pointing to the regulator to say, like, look, what do I have to do to reach the certain, let's say, quality levels to be able to perform certain flights. And the regulator is typically saying, yeah, but show me what you can do and I will evaluate whether it's safe, this type of interaction. And then from the use cases, everyone is very impatient and say, like, look, let me fly. Whereas actually to have individual flights in the air does not matter, because you have to make it viable. You have to make it economically feasible. Therefore, you have to have a full service and automated volume in the air. So there also, we see that a lot of technology providers are focusing also on the first investment layers, but actually they should immediately go for the automated layers. That's why I think the SGU program is very good to align with a lot of interactors to on one hand harmonize between member states, because that's also a big enabler, so that yes, we have one European Union responsible, and the Parliament is responsible for the legislation, but there are still quite some options that the different member states can choose from and opt in and opt out, and this makes it very tough for all of us to move forward. And that's why actually you see initiatives of operators trying to unite. The DORAI initiative is a very good one, where 6 operators throughout Europe try to put their requirements together and say, like, look, guys, let's have the same requirements. And these are about automation, integration, standardization.
Great. And there's a really interesting thing you said there, and that is it's sort of down to the member states. I'd like to ask Stefan about that. So you've done an awful lot of work on developing the regulations and developing the guidance material. What's your view of progress? Are we moving at the right pace? Are we slower than you would expected? I mean, the problem with doing everything in a continental European way is that you have to move at the speed of the slowest. And in Europe, sometimes that is very slow. How can you inject more pace? How can you inject more kind of incentives to get member states to start certifying service providers and really moving things away from tests into real commercial operations?
So actually, the member states, they do. So they may not do at the speed that the industry is expecting, but what I see is an acceleration of the rhythm over 2023. And I really hope that we will have some outcome on the first use space airspace designated in 2024. But as you say, use space is very complex and somehow disruptive compared to what we face in the past in all the domains, starting from where to locate the airspace, all the process of designations, and how to ensure that this volume airspace will be properly established, the definition or determination of the performance requirements, the certification process, etc., etc. So there is a lot of things, and more than usual, that are coming to the member states. So I understand maybe the frustration or the expectation of the industry, but certainly we go at the rhythm that is required in order to ensure a safe system and harmonize over Europe. And here, really, the key word is harmonization, because with an unharmonized system, we not get the benefits of all the work we are doing. And drastically or basically, we will not comply with the regulation. So how the thing that we can do in order to accelerate and to manage the various hurdles that we have. First, we have technical hurdles, and this is a responsibility on the industry to provide us the technical means, the technical standards in order to fuel the implementation and to solve along the way and along the path the various technical issues that we are encountering. We are relying also, like, for instance, we have Andrew today representing Eurocontrol, but this kind of institution, organization to support the member state. And us, EASA, I finished by what we do, us, EASA. We have various initiatives in order to support the implementation in a very wide manner. So technically, from a regulatory standpoint with the update or revision of the MCGM, but also a daily support to the member state. And this is where we can act on how to foster this harmonization and the implementation, and maybe to accelerate the implementation in helping providing support to the member state. And what I'm saying is no, it's not kind words. We have a clear task in the EPAS, so which gives a roadmap of the activities of EASA to support the member state. And we have a task force in order to gather the various member states in order to define the practices that we want to have, for instance, for certification of the USSPs or single CISP over Europe. We'll start the standardization activities to control what do the member states, and we do daily support. We answer to some requests, etc. So we are actually working a lot on this aspect in order to really accelerate, maybe it's not a good word, but make sure that we are not going to slow down to a level which totally impair the implementation of U-Space over Europe. And once again, harmonization with DG Move, our colleagues from the European Commission, is at stake, and we are putting a lot of effort in that.
Just to get a sense of some of the challenges of harmonization, how different are some of the approaches from different member states? Are they really major obstacles, or can they be negotiated? How are different people interpreting the rules in their own countries?
Now, there's a lot of variations. So we are Europe, so you may have 27 or 31 solutions, but we see a core aspect. So either some countries are going for very decentralized model, like for instance Switzerland, but there is a trend for some others in order to empower the single CISP coming from the ANSP on some countries with potentially more operational roles that it was expected in the regulation. So that's something we are discussing with some of the member states when we are encountering that problem. So this is something we want to tackle ahead of procedures like standardization or something very formal, because it may be too late in 1 or 2 years when the implementation will be done. So that's something we are making in a kind of ad hoc manner, again with the support of our colleagues from the European Commission, DG Move. And we are making meetings, we are starting to get information, etc. So two different things, so decentralized model and single CISP, which are a bit more punchy than expected, with more muscles than the thing we were expecting by the regulation, and taking over some roles of the USSPs in some cases. So that's the thing we try to avoid.
Thank you. I'd like to come to Billy now and ask, what sort of model have you got in Sweden? How much are you doing in Sweden as a Swedish view, or are you working with your partners on collaborating with neighboring countries on how you're going to harmonize standards, procedures, processes? What are you missing? Why don't we have UTM in U-Space in Sweden?
We miss the entrepreneurs, I think, and all the cases, and the leadership actually, and the creation of the business case. Because now we're kind of stuck in a situation where there are a few providers of vehicles and so on, and consultancies, instead of the cities or the regions or the municipalities or the healthcare organization taking themselves be in command to run this. But I see this is growing as we interact very heavily with these actors I just mentioned to raise the competence, and they're picking up competence in these sessions and in other forums. So it we're closing in, as Michael said, I would say, and they start formulating cases where real cases for these kind of services, in particular in the medical and the healthcare sector, we see them coming up.
Right. I mean, I can't believe that there's a lack of entrepreneurship amongst U-space industry. In fact, it's the opposite. There's too much in some ways. What's the business case, though? What is the business case for U-space for you?
Yes,
For us,
that's a great question, Phil. So you're absolutely right. I don't think there's lack of entrepreneurship, but I think it's a focus in certain areas which is needed to get the initial ball moving. And once the ball is moving, then you adjust. So in terms of a business case, we are a technology provider. For us, we want to make sure the technology that we provide and license to, whether it's CISP providers, CIS providers, or USSP providers, is at a level of maturity that it can be trusted and relied on. And in terms of the business case, given the state of the market, we believe, like you touched on, centralized versus more federated versus centralized. And I don't think that's necessarily purely a technical challenge. It's a business decision. It's not necessarily, as long as Stefan mentioned, we have clearly defined interfaces for harmonization, interoperability. It's more of a business decision. Yeah, you have a single system, that's fine. But whether you use one USSP or multiple USSP is more of a business decision than anything else. And if it's getting back to your question on the business model. Now, initially, as things are deploying, if you look at CIS, certain member states have designated certain funding for CIS. Hey, we'll cover the CIS funding for the first few years till you figure out the business case. That's just the CIS aspect. But the USSP, it has to be, that cost can be offset by the state initially. But in other cases, it would probably pass on to the operators, because at the end of the day, if we look at examples like Mikhail was talking about healthcare, it's more of an enterprise solution. Now, for these enterprise drones to operate and do their delivery operation, there may be other operations happening, but they need use-based services as well. So there's a way to monetize those use-based services as part of that business model. Whereas in other cases, there may be mom-pop operators that need to operate as well. Now, that's where it still needs to be figured out how that would work. For us, we are investing heavily in it, like Stefan touched on certification. So we are currently undergoing certification. And I can tell Stefan wasn't joking. It's not a trivial task by any stretch of the imagination. It's over a 12-month long period. And looking at everything, it's not just a technical, looking at software assurance, security, cybersecurity, operational readiness, and all those things. So those things are happening, and in line with, from a harmonization point of view, how do you look at the standards that allow you to build? Because for us as a technology provider, to get to the other point of the business case, going back to it, is we don't want to build stovepipe solution which we can market only in one country. We want to build a solution that can work across domains, because think of it, if air traffic systems were built which only work in one country and then there was a completely different air traffic system, you would have over hundreds of different kinds of air traffic systems. So similarly, we want to build systems that have standardized interfaces that operates across the globe. I gave you a long-winded answer, but hopefully it gives you a flavor of how we are thinking.
No, that's great, Amit. Thank you. So I'm going to ask you just these individual questions to begin with, but after that, I'd just like to sort of throw it open and then everybody comes in. Kuhn, very interesting there. I mean, I always thought that U-Space was going to be entirely funded by entrepreneurs and the private sector, that it was going to be a wide open market, and that we shouldn't get into the same issues that we've had with the air traffic management sector. We should learn some of the mistakes from there and actually say this is an entirely different market. What's the view of your members towards the whole market for UTM, for U-Space? And is Europe a special case, or I suppose my concern is why what's the investment case for U-Space service providers in Europe at the moment? Is there a real appetite, as Amit has told us that there is an appetite to invest, but what is the real market, do you think, and how should we incentivize that?
Thank you, Phil. That's the $1 $1 million question. Huh? and that's why, what are we dealing with, and what are the new technologies? What opportunities are they offering? And we should not underestimate the problem that we are dealing with. We are dealing with very, very innovative technologies, which we try to manage from a traditional aviation background, with traditional aviation processes and procedures. And then the challenge is to try to translate from this aviation background into what would that mean for digital aviation. And that is not a step, that is a leap, because I think if you look at the institutional framework, we have to make a clear distinction between the different markets which we see emerging. And that is the very reason why GUDMA has been changing from focusing exclusively on UTM towards focusing on the drone service ecosystem, the ecosystem as such. Because we think that if you look at the ecosystem, what will be the importance of UTM remains as an enabler. Whether there will be a business case for UTM only as a standalone service, as we know that as ATM in the traditional aviation, that's a big question mark. But we see there is a potential benefit for the whole economy. If Mikael sees, he wants to provide a digital service so that the doctor knows when an organ might be served. So you must integrate this drone operation into a wider service. And the doctor, he doesn't care whether that organ is brought by drone or by bike or by a helicopter. He just knows what is the type of heart that I will getting, what are the features, and how is my patient doing. So you must integrate that drone operation, and we call that then a drone service that you give to the hospitals or in general to the whole economy. And hence, coming back, what is the business case for developing the UTM and the drone service market? We talk about the Internet of Flying Things and a whole proliferation of digital drone services. And that is what is at stake. And that's why, yes, there is a business case, but we still have difficulty of unlocking this business case because it's difficult to reach out to the final customers. If you are a railways companies and you might benefit from your business might benefit from more information gathered by drones, but you don't know that yet because your business is managing a railways infrastructure. You don't know that. Then how can we connect those final customers with drone operators and the drone service ecosystem? And that's a difficulty. Where we are providing a supply, but demand is not yet aware of what's coming. And that's why we have to think more on behalf of the final customers, like Mikael is doing. He knows the hospital sector. He knows how doctors think. He knows how to integrate that drone operation and that drone service into the wider logistical chain. And only then you can be successful. Right. Yes, Phil. Please interrupt.
That's really interesting because I'm seeing what's happening in China at the moment with the type certification of the EHang 216. And as part of that, they have the UTM system integrated within what they call the cloud management system, which is the flight authorization system. So it's not a standalone UTM system, it's an integrated system. Could that happen? I mean, I would like to ask Stefan that. Would we be allowed to do that in Europe, or does it? I'll come to you in a minute, Andrew. Sorry, but this is really interesting. Would we be allowed to have an integrated UTM system within the overall flight management system, which it makes a lot of sense to me, or would that not be possible from a regulatory point of view? That there has to be an independent UTM system regulated differently.
So, different things. I think that's the goal, actually, and to seek for more efficiency and efficient use and very dynamic usage of the airspace, and to, at some point, integrate PAX operations, passenger operations, like autonomous eVTOL. So, yes, today will be possible Yes and no. Yes, because we have all the building blocks, almost all the building blocks, which at some point may enable that. But we are still lacking some essential bricks, like detect and avoid systems or this kind of thing. We are lacking, indeed, some parts of the regulation which are being worked today. So it's not for today, but we are already anticipating. And with regard to these concrete cases, I will do an analogy with what's going on in Europe. We are working. So Chinese are certainly ahead. Maybe it's more integrated than the first use case in Europe. But we are working. We have certification of, I think it's public information. We have Lilium and Volocopter, for instance. They are undertaking a certification of their first eVTOL. We are developing all the operational rules, and you have already the regulation that will be certainly published very soon. Has been published, sorry. The regulation, DMC, GM will follow. So we are setting up all the framework. I would try to not compare the two systems because we have different approaches. We have different system of values between the two countries. Maybe it would be hard to compare a product to product, system to system, because we may not push the effort on the same aspects. And once again, I want to promote this role of regulator, but the key aspects all over the discussion will be safety. So we must ensure safety of the system, meaning that we must be prepared. We must know that the technical standards that we will use are the good one. So safety for sure as a regulator, but also safety for social acceptance. We may have different populations, not resilient to the same kind of event. And I'm quite certain that in Europe, if you try to fly and we face the first accident, that may kill simply the concept, while other countries may be more resilient to that kind of thing. So I'm saying that because this is something which is really promoted by the European Commission. But what we can feel, us EASA, we did some survey in the past. What are the key aspects that we must consider to enable all this kind of operation? Safety is the first one. Then after that, you have privacy, nuisance, etc. But safety is the first. So we know that if we miss that things, if we enable the operations in kind of unsafe manner, look what's going on, I don't know, in California with autonomous vehicle, that may simply kill the appetite of the customers to go that way. So that will simply kill all the business. So yes, we can. I think we will. We have a certain number of hurdles that we are managing. Yes.
Thank you. That's very clear. Thank you. So Andrew, apologize for coming to you at the end. But how far are we off in terms of technical maturity of the UTM system, which I started out with a vision? Are we missing anything? I mean, apart from the standards and the regulations and member states and the certification process, and just in terms of the core technologies, where are we in that curve where we can say, yeah, we have a safe, scalable system?
So
and technology is there.
I know that Mikhail will come back, so I'll make my answer for him. There's two ways I can answer this question. The first is, what can we do in the laboratory? What is technically feasible? And in that regard, we have probably everything we need. What can we deploy commercially in practice? And there we're held back by a number of factors which are kind of blocking us. There is a lack of standardization. We would like to have a distributed system. We would like to have the common information service provider being one entity, one operator. We would like to have the use-based service providers being another, and we would like to have the aircraft operators being distinct. Each of these has to exchange data with the others. We lack standards for doing this. There is some stuff, but there are still some gaps where today people are improvising. And there's a lack of knowledge, which has come back to the responsibilities of the regulator. There's a lack of knowledge about how well all this stuff performs. We would like to be able to set a target level of safety and think carefully about the system and how it works and how each part fits into this and whether the target level of safety is achieved. But we simply don't have the experience. If we want to talk about so many events per million or 10 million or 1 billion flight hours, and we look at, we've got like 10,000 flight hours experience or something, we really are not in a position to make these judgments in a mature way. So there's a great deal of improvisation going on about how well does it perform. And the personally, I would expect quite a lot of the hesitation is coming from the regulator and others who are in a position about, well, we have to declare if this is safe or not, but there's not the level of experience they would normally have to say, yeah, go ahead, we know this will work. So I think in terms of what we can deploy today, yeah, we're not technologically bound, but we're more kind of maturity and experience bound, stopping us deploying this stuff. But there is an activity going on to try and develop this. We have a number of European Union funded projects funded by CINEA, which is a transport agency, which are looking at early implementation with a view to leaving this stuff running afterwards. So it's not full deployment, but it's kind of pilot schemes, which are not little trials that will last a week, but will run continuously. And these should open the door for us to gain the experience that will allow the kind of investment decisions to be made and to kind of bootstrap the system. And I've said it before in meetings, we have this problem about how do we get started, because a lot of these operations are commercially viable when we're in the mature state, when the control service is cheap, when the aircraft are cheap, when everything is well understood, then we can fly these deliveries and not charge much money. But to get there, we need to go through a period when there's very little flight, the control service is running to support hardly anybody, and so everything is terribly expensive. And to get past that phase, we either need investors with deep pockets or we need the state to step in. And yeah, we're kind of there in that region. So it's not a technological problem as far as I'm concerned. It's a kind of bootstrap problem.
That's really interesting. Billy, I'm going to ask this one for you. I mean, this is always going to be the problem with innovation, especially with something like drones, in which we don't have 30, 40 years of data. But surely isn't perfection the enemy of progress here? Aren't we going to have to say, look, we're not going to start day one with everything perfect, everything in place, everything working perfectly. Things are going to have to scale up very, very slowly. We're going to have to, but we are going to have to do something. I have to say, unfortunately, my heart falls when we say, oh, okay, we've got more tests coming in, more trials to prove this. Julie, what's your reaction when you heard? I totally understand you, completely understand you, but Billy, what's your view about how we actually take that first step, and especially from such a conservative, if you don't mind me saying, industry like air traffic management, not innovators particularly, but very careful, thoughtful people trying to do something very, very safety oriented.
I mean, that would definitely be, we need something to get up and run 24/7. These basic services, we might have to do the full regulation, and we already had really good discussion how to do the airspace permits and so on, the structure of that. But we need to start learning and collect the data to get this kind of drone in the box service, or ABCD or ABBB, or all the day. And there are these cases we like to stimulate, and you need, and of course, to get the funds there to start that. Otherwise, you will not learn. Maybe you can stop doing something else, also to get a little better economic situation. But there is a need for investment to get it starting. You cannot save into the future. So that's my point.
Good.
There is so much evidence around. We must not forget we are dealing with global technologies. The regulators all over the world are struggling with the same thing. So to what extent could we learn from expertise from other regions? And you know that some companies in the field, beyond the traditional ones like Airbus and Boeing, but also the big techs, they already are running commercial operations in other regions, Australia or US, And to what extent could that be taken into account also in Europe to make the safety case?
Yeah.
Second thing that I wanted to say is drone operations. We are considering such a wide range of types of operations. If you want to fly over the sea, be my guest. What more evidence do you need to prove that you will keep it safe? Or over forests or whatever? And to what extent could we there already kickstart and then balancing safety with, is there a market for this particular type of operations? Because that's a difficulty, and that's a chicken and egg. We can't start because we don't know whether it's safe, and where we can start, yeah, but there is no market for it. So how can we balance these? But if we learn from global commercial operations, I know some operators which have run more than 100,000 commercial operations, and also EASA colleagues will be willing to learn from this operation because they will share these things. So where can we kickstart them? And there we already see some small niches also in Europe, for instance, in the ports, where you have a segregated area, where you have a big incentive for the port manager to start that, where we have some Hamburg, Rotterdam, Antwerp, just to mention those, where you have a perfect setup where you can go beyond the laboratory. It is really commercial, and there is a big incentive, and there the use space and the drone dimension is integrated into a wider policy of digitization and automation, and then it fully makes sense. And that is one of the most promising kickstarters which we can see now, and I hope that it will take off in 2024.
Kel, could I just come in here for 1 second? So we've just talked about 3 different types of UTM system. There's the port UTM system with its own separate ecosystem. There's the drone operator integrated UTM system, and then there's the statewide UTM system. Your heart must be falling when you hear this, because that means 3 different types of standards and procedures that you need to look at. Or can we actually develop a template for all of them?
It's true that different options not necessarily lead to fast and efficient and in the end effective results, right? So I believe all the ingredients have been provided. We have some experience now. We have quite a few years behind us developing concepts, legislation, and technical solutions, and we see that none of us is really happy with the speed in the end. That came throughout of each of our comments. So maybe we should change a few settings, right? So one of them is the risk-based approach, which sounds fantastic and sounds also safe, but might be the opposite, right? Because what are we doing? For example, we're targeting to allow things that are low risk, and we are pushing back things that are perceived high risk, which and some examples come on the table. Oh, let's fly with over water, small drones, open category, let's let them go. And let's keep a hold as to things that are closer to cities, that are in the end closer to the population. By the way, that's where the sick people are. So medical use cases fall in the higher risk bracket. So what we actually society-wise want to push, we're based on a specific interpretation of safety, and we call that a risk-based approach. We're actually pushing back, and actually we are letting loose a lot of untrained, unskilled actors that actually make and maybe also break the reputation of drones. For example, we are collaborating related to, Andrew mentioned the European projects, which is a fantastic vehicle to get all professional parties together from all different areas, collaborate to push forward with these indeed complex solutions in the end. And there, for example, we are collaborating with an insurance company, and one of the let's say the first insurance products that they made in collaboration with us that we used to fly is now something they've commercialized, and a lot of pilots actually buy this thing. And what they're saying is that actually this is unbelievable. I mean, we have no claims. I mean, this thing is actually very low risk, and they've 60% of their business in ground-based transport, and they say, we have continuously claims, we have continuously accidents, people are run over, and here in this aviation thing, this does not happen. So we are actually by holding back on letting us get into the market in the cities and offer real professional-based services, we're actually keeping the risk level of at a societal base high. So actually, when we compare it with 10 to the -9, okay, maybe we're not there yet, but we should also compare it to the alternative that we're foreseeing. And if we then focus on certain use cases and clear the sky a bit for these use cases, and maybe keep some open category parties out of there, we might actually increase and with the current tools actually achieve a very high safety level, because you're still not in an overcrowded space. So this type of thinking is very safe, but might not be the typical understanding of a risk-based approach. And actually focusing on social valuable cases. It was mentioned that actually one of the cases that people most believe in is the medical setup. Well, actually, you have to bring it to the cities. And by the way, we have our Eagle's Nest, our command and control center, is a bit high in the let's say on a building, really down on the city. And what we see is actually not people. We see roofs. When you fly over a city, you have to try to hit someone. You really have to find the right hour to find someone, that someone is on the street, and then you have to try and hit it, because typically if you would still have a problem after all the redundant systems would fail, which is an aviation requirement to have redundant systems, then still it's quite a challenge to get and try to hit someone, because typically you'll just fall on a roof, and you will, with a parachute with low kinetic energy, you might touch one of the roof coatings. But so this is maybe also an element to throw into the game. Maybe we should rethink it, maybe we should focus, and maybe we should focus very differently. And the other thing is the automation and the integration, the volume. I fully understand that letting let's say these laboratories work in ports and specific areas sounds good, but at the same time we're limiting this volume, and we're having a lot of, for example, the USSPs that are acting are now focusing on getting solutions specifically for these playgrounds, and actually are lowering their automation targets, which is something that again holds back the real viable use cases. And I can tell you, as long as we don't get these volumes in the air, the Excels don't, the business case is not there. It simply does not reckon. And yes, I know these cases, for example, in Africa, fantastic setups where many miles are flown. But these type of setups are indeed very valuable compared to the logistics that were in place. If we compare that to a European setting, we have to really step up in order to improve versus the actual situation. And we have to compete also with the subsidies that those ground-based systems get. So this is also a point that came up. Who should pay, especially in the first maybe 10, 20 years for the infrastructure that we're talking about, the digital infrastructure. Actually, there's only one party. This should be level playing field, and the few operators that are now investing themselves very thoroughly, they don't have the volume to actually pay for a lot of these solutions. So it should, and that was the three models that were put forward. Yes, unfortunately, we should see whether this can be an investment centrally organized to put this base infrastructure in place, and then the entrepreneurs will come and they will use this infrastructure to the maximum towards social beneficial use cases, I would say.
Thanks, Michael. And I mean, you've heard that. You must have got a massive data now from all over the world on how safe drones are and how safe UTM is. Is there anything you can share with us on that?
Yeah, so actually I want to take a step back, because there was a lot of great discussion in the last 5 minutes and a lot of valid points were raised. So what I'll say is I completely agree with you, Phil. Perfect is always the enemy of good enough. And if we stick to that, this industry will never go anywhere. And that has been the hurdle in a lot of regulatory frameworks around the world that we work in. But we're seeing a paradigm shift. While I agree with what Andrew said, and I agree with what Michael said around, hey, we need full autonomy, we need to look at scale of volumes, I think these are parallel tracks. This is not a serial track either or. It's both. The full autonomy one is a little offset from the low risk one, but you need to enable both, because if you look from if you look at a global level or European level, there will be different complexities of operations that need to happen in different areas, different geographies, and different use cases. So you definitely need this crawl, walk, run. So doesn't mean that full autonomy, completely automated, large-scale operations you don't need to focus on that. We are working with Mikhail on one. I know, and that's a very exciting project. But then there are other scenarios based on our experience when we are working in other member states and other countries that they want to, for various reasons, whether it's security or other reasons, they want to start in lower risk areas and stuff like that. So you need to handle those in a parallel track. Now, coming back to your question about the data. So there have been thousands and thousands of flight operations happening, whether it's our system or other operators having integrated systems that Koen alluded to earlier. You can prove there are certain core services such as strategic coordination and stuff like that that can help in terms of scalable operations. Because if you have one operation in the sky, big deal. You can fly then, and if they're all segregated. The challenge is when you're doing unsegregated operations. That's where all these services add value when you talk about core use space services. Now you have the air risk, ground risk factors from an aircraft point of view, which Mikhail was talking about. That is absolutely required. And there's a reason why Mikhail was saying there are more insurance claim on ground-based transportation versus aviation, because aviation has always had higher levels of safety, and rightfully so. I'm a pilot. I would not fly in anything that was designed for a road. So same way. So I think we have proven that we can reduce the air risk, we can reduce the ground risk by having redundant systems, right kind of systems in place. But then the supporting system in terms of the ecosystem, we are here talking about use space. There are core use space services, and then you have to think about value-added services. You have to look at specific use cases, whether it's healthcare delivery or something else. There may be core services becomes the baseline for everything. But when someone like Mikhail, he's trying to run operations at scale, there are additional services, I'll call them supplementary or value-added services that are needed to enable, let's call them optional services for the lack of a better word right now. They're needed to add to that scale, to enable that scale. And whereas if you're in other places where you just basic services might be good enough. So it's very use case specific as well. So I think the data is there. The willingness, what we are seeing is willingness is there. It's a lot of business model decisions that are actually hampering at this point, because there are competing business interests at play in some places where they may not one model to work versus the other one. And you touched on the three models. Hey, if these three models get deployed, I'm personally not concerned about if three models get deployed, as long as it's an interoperable system. Someone can have, because in a truly like decentralized model, I can have 20 of these systems. One can be for an individual enterprise, one can be for the whole state. As long as it's interoperable, they are operating in the same airspace. The digital exchanges are happening. It doesn't matter. That is what the standards have been designed to do. That's what use space regulation is going to allow. And that spurs innovation and competition, because if there's no competition, there's no innovation. Hopefully that makes sense.
I would love to get everybody's view on when we're going to see the first operational, commercially successful use-based system operating in Europe. 12 months, 18 months, 2 years, 3 years. Please throw your hat into the ring.
If I could, you're going to see a demonstration at Rotterdam Harbour on Thursday, Phil.
Yeah.
I would say we're pretty close to commercial viability in a few niches like that. Harbors are a great environment for drone use. Anything you do another way is horribly expensive. As soon as you have to get a boat involved, it's a relatively safe environment. So I think much sooner than you have just predicted, we will see some regions in which there are commercially viable flights. And I was talking to somebody from Mana the other day. They are doing pretty well around the Dublin area. It's not a stretch to say this is a commercial business. I think we're closer than you might expect. What I don't see is it being pervasive and everywhere yet. We still have to do a lot before it's generally applicable, but there are certainly plenty of niches where it's already commercially attractive and viable.
Thank you. Any other?
Yeah, I don't think, Phil, we'll wake up one morning and the key would have turned and we'll have use space all around the world. It's not going to happen. If someone thinks that, they're mistaken. So it will always be in pockets, like Andrew is saying. And the way I see it personally from our point of view, based on our engagement, I see these pockets evolving all across Europe, and then these pockets becoming bigger and bigger, or maybe multiple pockets coming up, so the density increasing. But that's how it's going to grow. I don't think it's one day the whole nation has decided the whole country is a single use space, and all of a sudden we go live. And we are seeing, like, we did some stuff in Estonia like a month or so back in a use space sandbox environment where there were multiple operations happening in unsegregated airspace. So we did that. So, and similarly, Andrew is mentioning about some operations in the port area and stuff. So I think there's a lot more in the pipeline over the next 12, 18 months, in my opinion.
Could I ask Stefan and then Koen to throw their hat in the ring with this one, please?
Yeah, yes, I would like to say two things. The very first thing, yes, as I say, we are seeing a lot of initiatives over the member states and the various countries of Europe. Some are much more advanced than others, but reasonably, yes, we will have use space airspace in 2024. And I confirm that all the operations over harbor ports are quite advanced, and I call that pre-use space airspace because they are very, very close to a final state. So they were waiting for the member state to finalize their activities in terms of designation, certification, etc. But that's extremely close to what will be a final use space airspace. Even if it's a small volume, it's not the urban area as expected, it will be dedicated to certain type of operations, but that will be use space. Yes.
And are you happy with that? I mean, is that something which you feel is successful, that we can say in Europe this is something where we are leading the way?
Actually, yes, I'm totally happy with that for a good reason. As you say, we cannot wait for the perfect solution and everything to be set up in a perfect manner in all countries. So all these kind of things are able to provide data to us, are able to stress and to give feedback and to gain experience on these kind of activities. So everything that we can take to generalize for the use space implementation is extremely useful. So I'm very happy to see that they are working. For sure, I would like to see more, but we can gain experience. And the thing that you were saying, and then let me react on that for the audience, we will not put in the air authorized the operations. We are not confident in terms of safety, etc. So that's the thing we will not do. We are making baby steps. So all the community must understand that, yes, we make baby steps, and this kind of use space are baby steps. What we'll do, indeed, we will certainly start with limitations in terms of operation, in terms of capacity, in terms of performance. But as soon as we get experience, we'll gradually extend the flight envelope, let's say like that, in order to reach what we want to have, a generalization of use space, operations over cities, etc. And the thing I conclude on that, it's hard today to compare with what we have in terms of drones operation. I give you an idea. You have deliveries over cities in Europe, but you have a danger area zone, so you have a restriction in order to limit the access to the airspace to the other users. This is not use space. So we cannot strictly compare the operations that we have today with what we have to use space. So baby steps, all this kind of initiative will help to stress the model, to get data, to get tools in order to generalize. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Can I hear from Koen and then Billy, please?
Just to confirm that I'm happy also that the others agree with the statement that by 2024 we should see the emergence of the new technologies. But again, it is not a big bang. It will be step by step, and that's what we always had in our mind. We see some bubbles rising, and the bubbles will grow, and the bubbles then will connect into to real bigger markets. And that is to say, because we will see smaller bubbles, because we need to have the commitment of the local authorities, of the cities. Because at the end of the day, those drone operations, they will impact the citizens. And if we don't have the citizens buy-in and that they see that they see the benefits of those new technologies, it cannot advance. So that's why we need to have the full involvement and commitment of the local authorities in this whole creation of the new setup. And what then is success? I already heard Stefan mentioning, oh, we must keep it safe. Yes, but the UTM and the institutional framework which we are creating, a competitive market, these are the tools. At the end of the day, Michael, I'm looking now at you. We want to see that the benefit is that the hospitals are becoming more efficient, and we can give cheaper services, medical services to the citizens. That is a big benefit. So at the end of the day, it is the economic benefit and provided by drones operations and enabled by UTM. That is a chain that we should consider. And if that is only locally, it will spread out. It will spread out.
So Billy, do you see a city sitting on the executive board of a UTM company running a UTM system in Stockholm? Do you see a role for them doing that?
Yes, I was not thinking about Stockholm in particular, but within 18 months, I mean, there will be on a wider base. I'm not worried about acceptance, and we manage the airspace via kind of pre-use space or sandbox-like thing, and the performance are there for all the technology. So within 18 months, we will have multiple operations in place. I'm convinced. Maybe in Stockholm. Yes.
But will there be a role for the local authority then within the UTM system? I mean, they'll have to provide they'll have to upskill quite quickly. They'll need aeronautical information. They'll need to have some kind of view about licensing, perhaps. I mean, there has to be some role for them there.
Yes, they must be involved. That involvement is much wider than anyone expected, which is needed to make this happen. And for instance, for Östersund, it's a quite big city, but it's in the wild area in the middle of Sweden. But they have a drone operation department, but they were not thinking about the services as such. They're using for surveillance and other things like that, mapping and so on. But wow, we should be the operator. Then we are in control, and then we can tailor our own services. The technology there is just them to take the step. So it's a bit of upskilling. I agree, but I see it coming. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks, Billy. Mikhail.
Yeah, maybe a point on the cities, which are an extremely important constituency. Half of the hospitals in Europe are owned basically by the cities themselves as well. So this is, from our background, an important one. And since 2016, we've been working on these concepts together with doctors from the field up. And in 19, we flew over city to under national law. And then in 22, we were the first operator in the European Union to fly beyond visual line of sight over populated area city. And and now we were the first one with a passenger drone also to be adjacent to populated area with the medical cargo up to 50 kilo and flying real blood from the city. The key point is that typically the city is very positive. As long as you explain and you go in dialogue, and in the end, we have you know that our let's say operational authorization is now 800 pages long. So it's really very detailed. 1/3 of that is the emergency response plan. It's like listing out all the things that can go wrong and always finding mitigative measures and actions that you would take. And this goes into the extreme. And these are the things you do in dialogue with the, let's say, cities and the provinces, who typically are responsible for emergency response plans at that level. But the key point is also that they always want and appreciate a strong framework. So the legislation, the more normative it is, it's actually appreciated more by the city, and they are not wanting to fill things in themselves in the end. They want really a solid structure, and then they want to positively support it, but also they are sometimes and that's referring to the comment, should we allow a city to be in a board of director role in a UTM company, for example, in a use-based service provider, for example. And there, often, let's say the local politicians themselves are saying, like, you should also not put us in a dangerous or an awkward situation, because sometimes they're politicians, so they have to follow their constituency. They're voted in power. So on the one hand, they have a statesman has a vision to put something that's future oriented. At the same time, they have to be re-elected. So you cannot, let's say, put too much power also not in their operational hands, executive power hands, because then they might be forced to shut things down that actually totally makes sense, just to abate some emotional wave. So this is also something that we felt often a very strong request for support and clarification by the higher authorities and by basically the aviation legislation. Yeah? So the EASA and DJ Move have their very big role to play, and the more that's harmonized, the better. Because when we take then, let's say, our approvals from one country to the other one, sometimes we had to translate them. We had to, the acceptable means of compliance were not accepted. I mean, it's like. This harmonization piece is also a strong one, and this gives a lot of uncertainty at local authority level. So this may be one point that actually we feel from a practical experience that it's very much appreciated that there is actually strong guidance from, let's say, the higher authorities.
I mean, I have to say, I haven't seen that much work to skill up some of the cities where quite a few of these systems are planned. We did a survey, been working with Smart City Dublin, and there we've identified 16 areas where local authorities will have some kind of yes or no decision on where a drone flies. It could be, it could be areas of natural beauty or environmental sensitivity, and these are dynamic areas because there'll be crowds coming in. So there's an awful lot of work that needs to be done at that level to understand the role that local authorities will have here. I'm not sure that work's been done yet. But anyway, Koen.
Amit, you have been waiting longer than I have.
Okay.
Please.
All right, thanks, Koen. So no, my comment was, I think it's a valid point to discuss about the state-community engagement. And based on our engagements, I will see that we didn't see so much engagement from the city-state level when we are talking about small UAS. But as we are transitioning to AAM, urban air mobility, we are seeing a lot more engagement from state and community level, because now all of a sudden, when you're looking at these bigger eVTOLs, you have to look at not just the physical infrastructure, you have to look at the digital and the physical infrastructure that is going to enable new entrants into the airspace. So we haven't necessarily seen a lot of engagement around small, but it has getting expedited just because of all the focus on the AM, UAM side right now. So I know there are multiple engagements in different states and community. It's mostly what we have seen is at the state level, which have participation from the local communities. They're setting up committees, they're setting up working groups, they're setting up specific tooling and training for certain people in their infrastructure divisions, start looking at what does it mean to us from a city planning point of view. As we are planning the cities going forward, what are the impacts? What new skill sets do we need? What are the physical infrastructure requirements? And not just physical, what are the digital infrastructure requirements? So that is happening as we speak.
Thank you. And this is, Andrew, I'd like to ask you, so this is a bizarre situation. We're in Europe now. We're still struggling to get U-Space in 2024 for drones, and yet we're going to have eVTOLs flying flying passengers in Paris next year. So this is a kind of weird cart before the horse thing, isn't it? Really?
Well, with all due respect, so our esteemed colleagues at EASA have said the eVTOL has multiple prongs. It is a battery-powered aircraft. The operators wanted to fly them remotely or autonomously. It carries passengers. And so very sensibly, they have said, we'll tackle these issues one at a time. So what we will see in Paris is an electrically powered aircraft flying around in an urban area, but it will not be remotely controlled. It will not be being controlled by U-Space. It will be flying effectively, I think it's VFR they will be flying. It might be IFR, but I think it's VFR. So this is a small step on the path to, you know, the Jetsons or whatever it was we were thinking we would get to, but we're not going to be there in 2024. My hope is that by the time the technology has been approved for the flying, we'll also have the approval that we can control these things with U-Space. U-Space today is not viewed as being something which is adequate for controlling manned flight, but I hope that it becomes approved for that kind of thing, because this is the gateway to its application more generally and to reducing the cost of air traffic control and hopefully increasing the capacity of air traffic control. So this is the forward path, but we're only at the baby steps at the moment and we're just beginning. If I might, I raised my hand because just getting back to the point about cities, I would plug, there's an event in a few weeks where a project called AirMore will have a training session for cities, and I would invite anybody who's interested to search for that on the web, and there'll be 3 days of fun in Luxembourg. You can come and hear about how cities can think about the application of urban air mobility and how it might help them and what they might have to consider. But sorry, I've broken the thread of the discussion there.
No, not at all. And I'd like to also plug my AAM4Gov series of training modules that we've been given some UK government funding for, and that's available on the web. Stefan, fantastic that you're here. Does advanced air mobility, urban air mobility, make you feel nervous in any way?
Feel nervous?
Nervous.
No,
does it worry you?
No, it does not. As long as we have the capacity to work with the industry, the competent authorities, etc., to develop a safe system, I'm not nervous. I would be nervous if we would be excluded from that kind of activities or disconnected from, like you say, cities and so on. But it's not the case. So we are working. I have absolutely brilliant colleagues working on those topics. No, I'm not. It will take time. And just to confirm what has been said by Andrew, the first eVTOL operations will be VFR. And I started the certification of some products some time ago, like Lydium, where I was a software or avionics expert. I see that the time it requires to certify the product first, to define the requirements, to certify the product, and to have the ops requirements coming on top. So it will take time. But EASA, as all the regulators or partners in Europe are making their due diligence that it will happen in a safe manner. So it will come. With regard to the implication of the city as well, we have other initiatives at EASA level. We have this IAM hub, so a kind of repository of information, also to mature the concepts and how this kind of machine will be operated. Many cities are contributing. It's not really my duty, but we are in a credit team, so we are working on all those aspects. And we have also cities involved in the use space implementation. I can give some information. For instance, Bulgaria. We have also initiative over Zurich in Switzerland. Cities are contributing. So again, at various rhythm, pace, certainly, but they are there, they are supporting. I know that in Belgium also, for the cases that we have discussed, they are involved. So they are not that disconnected. And I would like to conclude on the thing that you mentioned, say, if you have multiple layers, how we bring all the people up to speed to get the authorization. It's why in the regulation, the AMC, we have created this kind of coordination mechanisms with coordinate role. That's the point. We want to have a person, an organization, empowered to dig all along these kind of layers and to gather the people around the same table in order to tackle all these kind of issues. So that was anticipated, and we are trying to provide the tools for the member states to go further with that. Yeah.
Thank you, Stefan. Koen?
just to add on this element, the coordination mechanism between the central and the local governments have been introduced. But what exactly are the local authorities then expected to do? They want to attract, to build attractive cities. But how do you do that exactly? And what exactly is then the role to protect your citizens? And that's why we have to rethink the current aviation tools to also protect the citizens. To what extent can you use the rules of the air to develop a kind of traffic regulation that the citizens feel protected, that they don't feel that my privacy is infringed, or that they hear the noise of they complain about visual pollution. So these are new terms which emerge, and which the local authorities will have to manage. And that's why we are looking from a local perspective towards the traditional aviation rules. To what extent could they transformed into or completed into also rules of the air which the local authorities can use? Like we have in the road system, we have pedestrian zones, we have 30-kilometer zones. To what extent could these types of rules be then implemented at the local level by the local authorities? To also that you have a kind of harmonized rules over Europe that all the operators could use. But still food for thought, but we should do that also quite urgently. And I'm happy that EAS has opened the door towards reviewing also, Sarah, the European standards rule of the airs.
I think what worries me slightly about all this is that we are society is in a very divisive time at the moment. There's all sorts of strange things happening politically, and there could be an enormous wellspring of popular support for drones. But I suspect it's not going to be everywhere. I suspect people will be worried about privacy. They'll be worried about security. They'll see what's happening in the world, and they're worried that artificially intelligent drones have a negative as well as a positive thing. And I'm not sure. I don't know how, as an industry, and as UTM suppliers, and I'm not sure whether this is the right forum to discuss this, but I don't know how we can prepare for that. How we prepare the messaging for that, and any views here would be great to hear. Perhaps Andrew, and then Stefan.
Well, just a kind of aside, in a project meeting I was involved in, we had a nice talk from somebody from the mayor's office from Barcelona, and he described how these battery-powered scooters appeared on street corners with no consultation at all with the city. They just appeared. And he said it was an absolute nightmare for them. These things were everywhere. People were having accidents. These things were getting thrown in the river. They were blocking the traffic. We are in a much better situation now with all of this regulation around this, that we are going through a consultative process involving both the citizen and the industry to introduce this thing in a measured way, perhaps not as fast as it might be otherwise, but probably without the kind of backlash which has led, for example, I live on the edge of Paris. Paris has banned these things now. So if we were to face that following some annoyance from drones, maybe we would all be regretting it.
Stefan, perhaps you could say something important here, please.
Yeah, just to complete on that about social acceptance. So indeed, we are focusing, when we discuss technically with our colleagues having an aviation background, for sure, we focus first on air risk for use space, because we want to prevent mid-air collisions between drones and between an aircraft. Ground risk in case of collisions or if drones fall from the sky. But per the regulation and all the things that has been added in the MCGM, we are focusing on security, privacy, and sustainability. And we are providing guidance in how to reduce nuisance to people, how to ensure that privacy will not be infringed, etc. So all those recommendations are pushed back or passed back to the member states. So when they designate a new space, they must consider all these criteria. And we are also, as I said earlier, making some survey or taking consideration, so to get social intent, to understand what are the needs of the citizens and ultimately customers of those services. And what we see is not only Europe, but there are convergences, because we are not only only Europe is working on that. We have some initiative in Asia, for instance, and they are doing the same because actually, as a citizen, as a customer, we have the same kind of expectation that we are in Europe, in Asia, or in US. For instance, in Asia, in one of the countries, one of the concern was the bird rest. So we are a bit surprised, but only these kind of environmental things are very pregnant in the mind of the people that we are discussing with. So we are considering that in all the activities we do. What we maybe is not missed, but what we need to emphasize is to convince the public that we are doing that. Yes.
Great. Thank you very much indeed. Now, so we've got 15 minutes before we wrap up. Happy to take questions from the floor if anybody has any questions. But in the meantime, could I just ask you to all of you just to look, say 2026, where will we be in Europe with drones and U-Space? Perhaps you could just give us all your vision of where we will be by then in terms of numbers, complexity, how much money is being made. Andrew, let's start with you.
I expect, and this may not be very cheerful, but I expect a lot of energy to be the first. So we will see U-Spaces popping up very soon, but probably after a country has done one, there'll be a little pause while they reflect and look at it and see how it goes. So I would expect 2024 will see probably 2 or 3 emerge, probably by the end of 2024, another 10. But after that, I think it'll tend to be like mushrooms, one growing in each country, and then there'll be a little bit of a reflection and pause and just seeing what happens. I would hope that with a bit of encouragement we can get more, but sadly I think it's going to be a bit of a kind of trophy kind of thing to have the first one for some states. I see Billy smiling. I wonder if that's a reflection of his view in Sweden.
Billy, what's your view?
I mean, we have to link it to in the logistic system and to the people's benefit. They must understand, demonstrate, and we must stop doing things in the old way and change that to the new way, using this technology in a few things. Then I think it will start rolling.
So 2026, what will Sweden look like in terms of UTM and drone operations?
Ooh, then it will be all up and running, smooth. And I think we, LFE, will manage most of it. But in a couple of years from that, there will be also a competition in a few aspects, but not from the beginning. It's too early to start the competition. It will be a mess.
Right.
We have to take our responsibility. Thank you.
Of course. Mikhail, perhaps your view.
Yeah, I also think that in 26 we'll have at least the technologies integrated to be able to indeed offer some reliable services to institutionals, meaning that we can really indeed offer something to society that's really a benefit, like Koen described, that we can really make the healthcare system more efficient and therefore ensure democratic continued access of a fantastic system in Europe. Yeah.
Fingers crossed. Amit, what's your view of Europe, U-Space in Europe in 2026? Will you be making lots of money out of it?
Lots is it's left for interpretation. What does lots mean in this case? But before I answer that question, just to highlight, the Q&A section is open, and I think we have a question. So if audience wants to ask any question, now would be the time. Click on the Q&A and please start putting in your questions. And we have the last 10, 11 minutes. And
we have one question, which I'll come to at the end. But yeah, right. So 2026.
So 2026, I think Andrew did a great job articulating what I see by 2026. The way Andrew explained it, I agree with him completely through 2024, and then mushrooms popping up in 2025. By 2026, I see a lot of these vertical use spaces. What I mean by vertical use spaces is use cases is enterprise-specific use cases, whether it's an enterprise doing large-scale medical delivery operation or someone doing critical infrastructure, energy, and those kind of things. They are using USpace for routine operations, not onesies and twosies, at scale. That's what I see, and I see a bunch of those pockets all around Europe in different areas.
Great, thank you. Stefan, what's your vision?
Actually, my vision is very similar to the one of Amit. I think we will have USpace space in most of the European countries, ensuring multiple type of operations, delivery, inspection, and medical services, this kind like that. I hope that we'll have maturity on terms of services, regulatory framework as well, because we need to update that. That's something I plan to do 2025, 2026. But not yet fully autonomous operations and not yet eVTOL passenger operation. It will be certainly too short. No, I don't think in 2026. I don't have any target in mind, but it seems to me that it will be too short. Yes, we still need to work on the first layer and maturity of the system before to host passengers. So that's the key. Yes,
that's interesting. Thank you, Kern. What's your view?
We talk about digital services, and if you compare, for instance, with the introduction of ChatGPT, I read the other day, after a couple of months, ChatGPT was used by not a couple of thousand people, not by a couple of millions, but by 300 millions. So that is the opportunity to scale digital services. Now, will we scale drone services as compared to ChatGPT? I don't know, but if you see how, for instance, companies like Mana, when they go to a new city where they organize commercial activities in a new city, then it goes by the thousands a day. So that will scale automatically. If you see, for instance, to call a US company, when Wing introduces a new center from which they start operating, that doesn't stop with a couple of hundreds. That goes thousands of operations a day. So if you see by 2026, if you have USpace rolled out in Europe and you see some opportunities for commercial operations, it will mushroom quickly. And then I agree with Stefan that the more complex and more risky operations will not be taking place in 2026, but small logistics, cargo will take place, and above all, information gathering. And that will be the big benefit for the economy, where so many industries will gather data to better manage their daily business. We already mentioned ports, but also local authorities and so many other companies will benefit from data gathered by drones, and that will mushroom once we have that basic infrastructure in place.
So we have a question. What about security now that commercial drones are being modified and adapted for warfare in Ukraine and elsewhere? The one thing we haven't talked about security. Presumably there'll be layered approaches within the UTM system. There'll be remote ID, possibly, well, definitely in Europe, and there will be obviously other provisions from the police and security services will be able to have a kind of like the goalkeeper view to that. Stefan, how should we approach this issue of security? Is this the right forum, or is it the police and other organizations who have the primary role here?
So it's not the primary forum, but just to say that yes, we are paying attention, and actually, as you said, the enforcement of remote ID will be already a way to discriminate good users, people maybe having bad intention, and we have colleagues working on counter-UAS systems, detection system in order to detect non-cooperative drones, etc. So in parallel of all we do, the thing we do to enable the operation, we are also trying to detect or to counter the operations that could happen in uncontrolled manner in the airspace. So we are paying attention to that. But it's not really indeed the goal of USpace and the right forum to address that. Yes.
Thank you. Is anybody else who want to respond to the question?
Yeah, I get it. So I think if you look at it at the 10,000-foot level, you feel a bad actor will not cooperate with USpace. They have no incentive or reason to cooperate in that case. It has no relevance to USpace other than the electronic conspicuity or the electronic remote identification, as Stefan said. At that point, we can just tell, is it a friend or a foe? And at that point, it passes on to the law enforcement section how to address that.
And I suppose there's an aspect. I'm sorry. I mean, yeah.
So that was from a rogue actor, but the security in general of the use-based system. At the end of the day, it's we are in the IoT thing space here. So it lives in the cyber world. So we need to have all checks and bounds in terms of not just cybersecurity, but software assurance of the use-based system as well, to make sure it is doing what it is doing. You have traceability, it's acting the way it should be. And that falls in line with what I think Stefan is probably better equipped to, like from a certification point of view, how do you ensure that it's meeting it has the right check marks and meeting the right levels of standard from cybersecurity assurance point of view as well.
And I apologize for this question. It may seem rather naive, but are we clear about what kind of flight tracking system is going to be available to ensure that that all the drones are maintaining the paths they should be maintaining, and there's nothing out there that we don't know about? Yes, Andrew.
Basically, we're in a bit of a quandary here because we are in an arms race with the bad guy. So we could devise various cunning things and they would think carefully and try and overcome them. But we do have a number of fundamental problems to solve. You can buy a radar which will track drones. It is quite short range because they fly near the ground. So line of sight doesn't take you very far before you hit the horizon. We can make some barriers to these things flying, but more likely we will simply, when there are sensitive places, we will prohibit flight around them because as Stefan said, as Amit said, you know, the bad guy doesn't cooperate with us. So if they're determined enough, they will go ahead. It's just, we need the experience to develop a reasonable approach to what measures are justified and why it's worth spending the money on them, because none of them are free. And then we will work out how to do it. I'm sorry if that's not very optimistic, but I think that's where we are today.
No, it's very sensible, actually. So we have another question. Will the recording be made available? Amit's nodding his head.
Yes, all the huddle recordings are made available publicly for everyone.
That's fantastic. Thank you. Any final remarks from everybody? We've only got a couple of minutes left. Anything we haven't talked about that we need to? Stefan, yes. Thank you.
Yeah, about security, just a word. Indeed, as I say by Amit, we are paying a lot of effort in security, the digital security of the system. From the regulation, also because we are directly mandated by the European Commission. You may know that there is this European Cyber Act, or Cyber Resilience Act, where EASA is empowered to check all those aspects for all the kind of aviation-related domain. Could be an aerodrome, could be the ATM, could be the aircraft certification. So then use space. So we are putting a lot of effort to make sure that the system is secure enough. Yes. So from that perspective, we do completely our job in that regard. Yes.
Thank you. Any final remarks?
Maybe one element to put in the game is privatization. So this is an element that can help a lot by allowing mobility, but keep it safe. You know, by having very clear rules, as it links a bit to the rules of the air. But it's really not like high and low priority, but be much more, let's say, granular and have a very clear concept on that throughout all the use cases. Yeah.
Thank you, Mikhail. Well, I'd say it's been a really interesting discussion. Thank you all very much indeed for all your inputs. I'm a lot more optimistic, I have to say, at the end of this session than I was at the beginning. And 2024 is going to be a really strange year with all sorts of strange things flying around in the sky. But with all your help, I'm sure everything will go incredibly smoothly, and it's going to be a great future. Thank you very much indeed for listening to